Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm just going to bow in and then I'll explain what we're going to do in this session. Okay, so face play. Chori, kunyi. Thank you. Now, we're not going to do a warm-up first. We're going to do explanation of what we're doing today first. So if you want to take a seat or if you want to stand and just sort of move around and keep mobile, then it's entirely up to you. Once I've gone through the description, then we'll do a little warm-up and we'll try to think about implementing what we're going to do today into our technique. So today is going to be about the theory of power. Now, the first training secret in Taekwondo is to study the theory of power thoroughly. To be honest, that's probably a lifelong journey in itself. So don't put too much pressure on yourself in trying to really understand this straight away. I would suggest that you take on as much as you can and then go back to it and do a bit more, go back to it, do a bit more. Okay, let's have a look at the theory of power. So we have 6 elements in the theory of power. Now I've listed them out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now in the encyclopedia, it's not listed out 1 to 6. It's just, that's the order that they go through if you read the encyclopedia, okay? But to make it easier to remember or easier for us to sort of understand, I put them into 6 elements, all right? So I put them into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, not necessarily in the order that we might teach them, but I'm trying to go by the encyclopedia. We'll go through these in this order, all right? So if we start with number 1, reaction force, okay? Now, we all know, because we've been training in Taekwondo for quite a while now, that we all know the reaction force, when we pull that fist back to the hip, we call that reaction force. When we bring it back to the shoulder, we call that reaction force. When we take it to the forehead, we call it reaction force. When we bring it underneath the arm, we call it reaction force. Maybe on top of the arm, we call it reaction force. Again, underneath, we call it reaction force. Okay, so we understand that one arm does an action and the other arm does what we call the reaction. However, we should also know that there's 2 types of reaction force, okay? There's 2 types. I don't mean one is bringing it back to the hip and the other one is bringing it to the shoulder or underneath the arm or to the forehead. I mean, that is all one, the reaction force of us as the practitioner. Then we also have the reaction force of our opponent, okay? So if our opponent was standing still and we decided to attack our opponent because they were threatening, or they did a threatening gesture, or they went to try and attack and we needed to defend ourselves, then we would just have the mass of our body and the power of us. So say we weighed 60 kilos for argument's sake. So 60 kilos, and I did a punch to my opponent, there would be 60 kilos going into that punch with a few variables, obviously. If we could sort of like have it measured, and we could say categorically that, let's say I was 60 kilos and I did a punch, there would be 60 kilos going into that punch. Now, if we were to use the reaction force of our opponent, we would actually punch as they were moving to us. So again, for argument's sake, if I was 60 kilos, my opponent was 60 kilos, so not only have I got 60 kilos in my punch, I've actually got 120 kilos. Again, there will be lots of variables in that, so it won't necessarily be exactly 120 kilos, but this is just for argument's sake and for us to understand. So one type of reaction force is utilizing this fist back to the hip, to the shoulder, to the forehead, underneath the arm, a different action to what the action is doing to help us balance that out within our body. The second type of reaction force is using your opponent's force against themselves. So instead of waiting them to stop and punch or strike or kick, you're actually going to hit them as they're moving forward. So you're going to have not only your body mass and your action, but also their body mass and the reaction of their movement as well. Okay? So they're the 2 types of reaction force. Us, our own, and utilizing our opponents against them. The second, concentration. It doesn't mean you have to concentrate really hard on what you're doing. Okay? It means the concentration of what we're doing within our body and within that mass and how we move. So if you think about a hose pipe, and you turn the tap on, and there's not too much water pressure in the tap. The hose isn't really long. The water will just sort of shoot out this way and probably sort of do that action like that, okay, as it's coming out the hose pipe. Now, if you were to get your thumb and you close off some of the hole, so therefore you're making the hole very small, you're going to build up some back pressure in that water, and that water will now start to shoot out. So you close the hole off, and instead of the water doing this, the water might actually go double or quadruple the distance, because you're creating pressure and you're concentrating all of that pressure into a very small outlet, and it creates more force and creates more pressure. Okay, so what we're doing is we're putting all of our body mass into a small target, okay, or a small area of our attacking tool into the smallest part on when we're attacking our opponent. So that would be either using just the front two knuckles, just the back of the two knuckles, or just this knife hand, or the reverse knife hand, or even just the finger or the fingertips. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to concentrate all of our mass into a very small area, and thus producing more power per square inch, if you like. So if you imagine you got up tomorrow and there was 6 feet of snow, and you put your trainers on and you climb out your window, because it might be right up to your window, and then you try to walk on the snow, you're probably going to go straight through the snow, because what you're doing is you're concentrating all of your weight into those small areas of your feet, straight down through into the snow. If we were to be able to strap big bits of wood on our feet, like big, I don't know, 2 feet by 4 feet, and walk on, we would probably be able to walk on the snow, because we're doing the opposite of concentration. We're spreading our weight out over a larger area. Okay, so we want to concentrate all of our body mass into a very small point, small area, to bring about more power in that concentrated area. Now, I've also got an extra bit here on this concentration. So we've just explained about the tool. So we're using just a very small part of the hand, either the punch or the knife hand or the fingertips, but also we are concentrating the movement of the hip. Now, this is a bigger part of your body. So this is a bit of a crossover between concentration and mass. All right. So we're concentrating this large area around the waist, and we're going to go throw the hip into the technique. So not only do we thinking about the attacking tool, but we're also thinking about concentrating these big muscles to move with that tool, or because they're larger, they're going to move a little bit slower. So we have to slightly move them just before and then finish at the same time. So if we were going to do, say, a middle block, we would turn this way. So you see slightly first, 1, 2, but finishing at the same time. If I was to punch, slightly first and then finish at the same time. Even an obverse punch here, I'm going to boom, boom, this way. So there's that little moment of movement and then finish together. So the concentration isn't only about the attacking tool or even the blocking tool. It's also about concentrating this larger part of the body in the technique and moving in that particular technique. Number 3, equilibrium. Okay, balance. But it's bigger than just balance. It talks about 2 types of equilibrium, one being dynamic and one being static. So obviously, the dynamic equilibrium would be when we're moving, and the static equilibrium would when we're stationary. So what that means is, as we step, say we were to step in a walking stance, we've got to have total focus and equilibrium and understanding about where our center of gravity is. So you see, I'm here at the moment. This is my center of gravity at the moment, right through the center of my body. Because I'm in walking stance, it goes right in the center of both feet. As I step forward, if I was to keep my body on this line, I'm going to lose my dynamic equilibrium, because as I lift this foot up, my weight is going to pull myself over there. So you see, as we come forward, we have to bring this foot in to the center line. Now my weight gets distributed here. It would be just as bad if I went over this way, then I'm going to fall over that way. So I've got to understand my equilibrium. I've got to understand the center of gravity, my center of gravity, and where it should go and where it should finish. So that would be when I'm moving. So really trying to understand how to move, how to feel the center of gravity, feel where your center line is, and be able to move in a very controlled and dynamic way, but with complete equilibrium. When we finish the technique, we have to utilize our stance. Now the stance, if you really understand the stance, that will go a long way to give you that static equilibrium. If you do a walking stance and you're only half a shoulder width, you've not got much going on either side of your feet, and actually the top half of your body is outside of your feet, and it'd be like walking on a tightrope, which you've got to balance. You've got to do all this to try and balance. Yes, you're sorting out your equilibrium, but you shouldn't need to have to do that if you're in a good stance. If you're in a good stance with one shoulder width wide, you could stay there forever, okay? So you've got brilliant static equilibrium, and then good dynamic equilibrium. So this is about your balance throughout everything. And even when you start to develop into your bending ready stance, which you already have done as a black belt, you then start to really understand where this body should be, where the shoulder should be, where this knee should be, where this foot should be, how this knee should be, and how the foot should be. So you're looking at all of those aspects, trying to stay in that static equilibrium position, and even getting into the bending ready stance, being able to balance, getting into that stance and staying in that stance, okay? Moving on, number 4, breath control. Now, breath control isn't just breath control. Breath control can be quite deep. Now, we shouldn't be thinking about making a noise with breath control. The noise will happen because of what we're doing, but we shouldn't create the noise. We shouldn't create any noise. We shouldn't create a ch or a th or anything like that. We shouldn't do breath control from the nose. It should be from the mouth, but it's short and sharp exhalation of air, and we shut it off with the tongue. Okay? But this is tight. So we're forcing the air out. The abdominals go tight, which creates the whole body to go tight. So you've got other factors involved in breath control. Not only are you developing your abdominal muscles, are you developing your lungs, but also you could, if you're in a combat situation, you could actually stifle or stop yourself from being winded, or you could stop yourself from being knocked out if the breath control is done in the correct way. Also, if you are sparring, you get a little bit tired, you've got to learn to use how you breathe so you're not showing your opponent that you're tired. Because if you're up against an experienced sparrer and they see that you are tired, they're going to pile the pressure on, just like you would if you were sparring somebody and you could see them getting tired, okay? So breath control is just bigger. It's bigger than just breathing. It's bigger than just making a noise, okay? Yes, we have different types of breath control, connecting, continuous, fast motion, slow motion, but that's explained at a different time. What we're talking about here is a short, sharp exhalation of air at the moment of impact, all right, or at the moment of each blow. Number 5, mass. Now, obviously, that's our body, that's our weight, okay? However, we also can produce this mass, or we can develop this mass, or we can enhance this mass, and we can use this mass in 2 ways. One, by utilizing the knee spring. So that's dropping the body down, okay? Creating that downward force, and also by utilizing the hip, which falls again with concentration. So not only do we think about this sine wave motion to drop the body down, but we're also thinking about this hip jerking motion to force the mass going not only down, but also in the direction of what we're doing, okay? So that's our mass. Now we can't increase our mass unless over a period of time we put on weight, and then we're going to increase our mass. But we have to just utilize what we have at that moment in time in actual combat. So now all of this, okay, so you've got reaction force, concentration, equilibrium, breath control, and mass. All of this, as well as your technique, helps you to produce the speed, okay? Now, speed. If we move from the speed, and we'll come back up to it, if we go down to the equation for power in Taekwondo, which basically force equals m times a, mass times acceleration. In Taekwondo, we equate that to half mass times velocity squared equals our power. So that's how we work out what power that we have. There's so many variables there. The vectors between A and B, a constant or an accelerated speed, how the body is not a solid object, all of that I know. So there's lots more to it than that. But this is the basic term and the basic understanding. Half mass times velocity squared. Now what that tells us straight away is that that velocity or acceleration is the most important aspect to produce power, right? So if we go back to speed, how do we do that then? How do we create that speed? Well, we're going to use all of this. We're going to use the reaction force. We're going to use the breath control. We're going to use the equilibrium. We're going to use the rotation and concentration of the hip and focus of the attacking or blocking tool. And if I can explain it, I've got down here a little note, stone on the glass, right? If I had a pane of glass, 1 meter by 1 meter, and that piece of glass was suspended on 4 bricks, and I got a stone, maybe, I don't know, that big, okay? So a stone that big, right? And maybe that thick. And I just got the pane of glass, say this is the pane of glass here, and I've got that stone, and I just dropped it from about, I don't know, 2 inches like that, right? It probably wouldn't break the glass, okay? We can sort of understand that. We drop it from there, and it just drops onto the glass is okay. Now, if I got a stone, a quarter of the size, okay, a quarter of the size of that particular stone, and I went 10 foot up in the air, dropped that stone right in the middle, the glass would probably smash. Now, what that's telling us that that particular piece of mass will accelerate in a downward force because of gravity, and then it will accelerate and accelerate and accelerate the velocity, and it will get faster and faster and faster. And then by the time it gets to the glass, it's traveling at a great speed, a bit of mass, bang, smashes the glass, right? So that means we're going to try and drop the body by utilizing the knee spring in the sine wave, okay? So we're using that downward force to produce that power, and we're trying to utilize the reaction force to develop that speed. And if we can do that technique and accelerate that technique, we're going to produce maximum power. So if you had somebody, say 60 kilos, and they were breaking 3 boards, and they did the technique a certain speed, they break the 3 boards, okay? If you then got somebody half of their mass, or a little bit lighter, but they punched twice as fast, they could potentially maybe break 5 or 6 boards, right? Because we've seen it happen. It's proved, okay? It's been proven. Even at the last European Championships, one of our students from the UTA, a small chap, came up. Everybody was wondering how he was going to do this. 5 or 6 balls up on the holder. But because he utilized the speed and technique, he smashed through the boards. And for me, that was just a complete equation of what we're looking at here, and proof of what we're looking at here. It was proof of the theory of power. Okay, so what we're going to do now for the next sort of 25 minutes, we're going to do a little warm up, and we're going to see how we can implement this into our techniques. And then that's going to be an ongoing process as a black belt, right? Depending on what degree you are, depending on where you are with this whole theory. Okay, so if you want to stand up, if you're not already, and just rotating the arms forwards. Good. So again, I'll try to sort of mix this up. We've got a bit of theory, quite a lot of theory, and then we're going to implement it. So we're still going to do a bit of a workout. And backwards, nice big circular motions, getting those shoulders working, the shoulder girdle working, because you do use a lot of your shoulders when you're doing this theory. And one up and one down. Good. That's it. And out and in. Now, just taking the left arm forwards. Really feel that shoulder. And backwards. And other arm. And backwards. Good. Rotate your waist. Get into the hips, lower back. So as we go through this, we're going to go through this in the order that we've just done. Okay, so you could still use your breath control and your sine wave and trying to do it fast. It's just that we're going to be thinking about each element as we do that. So I don't want you to stop doing sine wave or breath control until we get to that point. You're going to use it all, but you're just going to focus on the actual element that we're thinking about. And shut. 2.5 shoulder widths, just swinging one to the right, one to the left. It's important to get this back warmed up, hips warmed up. Because when you start doing this properly, you're going to tap into muscles and little muscle groups that you may not be using. And then they're going to get fatigued. And then you'll probably feel it in a few days' time when you get the DOMs for those particular muscles. Good. And show, reaching down. Excellent. And going to turn to the right, lunge forwards, push and change. Good, push and change. So you're using the leg to push out. Good, so so we're here, we want to be warming up the quads and the hip flexors here as we push out. Good, now pushing the back heel down. Excellent, and just jogging on the spot. Good. Bicep curls. Get those elbows working. Biceps working. And pushing your arms up and down. Don't just do that. Nice big movement. And star jumps. Good. And shut up. Shake your legs. Okay, so we're going to do a sitting stance punch, but we're going to be thinking about the reaction force, right? Now, with the last video, because we were looking at, or with color belts, I didn't really emphasize this backward motion here, okay? But to develop that speed, to develop that reaction force, we need to understand that backward motion, okay? So if you're looking from the side, from this position, the first thing we have to do is drop the body down. This comes off the hip, this elbow bends, and then we do a backward motion, slight lateral movement, and a punch. And that will create that technique. But we are thinking about pulling this fist back, right? So we're concentrating on reaction force. We're thinking about reaction force. We're pulling the fist back rather than thinking about this punch forwards. Let that just naturally happen. So left foot, sitting stance punch. Ready? And hana. Good. Pull. Set. So it's pulling rather than this, okay? Let that happen, but pull it back this way. Pull it back. Ready? Hana. Good. Two. Set. Set. Dos. Dos. Now, thing to remember here, what can happen when we're focusing on pulling this hip back, this fist back to the hip, we could end up straightening up this arm. Right, now this arm should be bent. Remember the training secret, both arms and legs must be bent slightly whilst the movement is in motion. So from here, we have to go slightly bend, keep it bent, use the shoulder, and pull it back this way. Let's do a few more. Ready? And, two, set, net, dos, pull it back. Yes, here we go. Yeah. Yeah. And follow, shot. Excellent. So that's reaction force, thinking about it coming back. Or if we're doing this, thinking about it, back to the shoulder. Don't just do the actual strike and this hand's just moving back to the shoulder this way. Or back to the forehead. Or underneath the arm. Underneath the arm. So we're thinking about not just what we're doing, but the reaction. And then that all becomes natural. Now I want you to think about the actual attacking tool, right? So when we're punching, so we do a punch and we do a knife and strike. So now the thought process, we're thinking about generating this body mass, slight rotation here, concentrating these bigger muscles, okay, which we'll also look at in the mass as well, into that punch or into that strike. So let's go sitting stance again. Ready. So we're thinking about pulling that fist back. But now we're thinking about these front two knuckles, right? Boom, this way. So really focus and concentrate there. But at the same time, your waist has to come one this way. So you're utilizing this movement. Not too much twisting, but here. One, here. One, bang, like that. Boom, boom. Okay? Ready, and good. Two, set, net, dos, yes, yego, yede, hayo, yede, and paro, shot. Now we're going to go left and right, or right and left. We go right first because we're doing an attack. So we're going to go L stance, knife and strike. But you see we're going from this position to this position. So don't turn and then strike, okay? We're going to go from here, one here, and strike. Keeping maintaining the L stance. We're going to come back, and then the other way, right? So we're thinking about this reaction, we're thinking about the knife hand, and we're concentrating these bigger muscles on the hip to go into the direction of the strike. Ready? So to the right first, and hana, paro. To the left, hana, paro. Right, hana, paro. Left, hana, paro. Right, hana, paro. Left, hana, paro. Right, hana, paro. Left, hana, paro. Right, hana, and paro. Shot. Good. Now we're going to think about equilibrium. Okay? So not only are we thinking about the position when we finish, but we're also thinking of how we get there. Okay? So the dynamic equilibrium and then the static equilibrium. So give yourself a couple of walking stance space. So we can just do, let's do a middle inner forearm block. So we're focusing on concentration, concentrating these larger muscles, concentrating on that small part when we block, and now thinking about the reaction force as well, coming back to the hip, and then thinking about that equilibrium on how we're getting there. Chumbi. So go forward to this side first, which is your left. Ready? And hana. So good, strong stance when you finish. Ready? Hana. Good. Backwards. Hana. Third. Forward. Hana. Third. And paro. Shot. Good. So if you notice that the acceleration increases, right? It starts off slow, and then accelerates. We can't expect to do the technique from stationary to finish in one constant speed. We have to accelerate, okay? So we have to increase the speed until we finish the technique, and then it decelerates at an instant, okay? As you see, when I'm stepping forwards, I come to the center line, and then I go back off the center line. Also, I'm turning my body, so then I'm, boom, turning my waist, turning my hips into the technique to produce all of the concentrated mass around here, okay? So remember, concentration and mass are quite linked, okay, as far as that's concerned. And then the equilibrium. So if I step forward this way, I'm not going to have good equilibrium like this. I'm sort of almost trying to get there before I fall over. We've got to get there in a controlled fashion. This way. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay? So thinking about equilibrium as well. So all of those things. Reaction force, concentration, equilibrium. Ready? Again, forward to the left side, this side first. Ready? And hana. Third. Backwards. Hana. Third. And paro. Shot. Good. When you're doing that one leg stance, okay, so you've got to try and get your equilibrium. You've got to figure out where your center of gravity is. If I go there, I'm going to fall over. If I go there, I'm going to fall over, okay? So this is quite simple stuff, natural stuff, okay? Stuff that we just naturally know. but it's a case of trying to get the muscles in the feet, engage the core, good center of gravity right down the center here. And then we go into a bending stance. We don't just now bend this knee like that, because then I'm going to topple over because there's more weight out on this leg here. I've got to bend the knee, but I've got to bend it slightly out this way. All right, so if I'll be facing this way. If I'm facing you, then this would how my bending ready stance would be. This knee's going 45 degrees, half facing you in a forearm guarding block position. Okay, so we've got to try and work out how our hip should be, how this knee should be, where this foot should be, where this knee should be, how the body should be, to try and figure out your equilibrium. And that will help you with your static equilibrium, and it will help you with your dynamic equilibrium. So you've got to find out your center of gravity for that. Now, breath control. Okay, so sharp exhalation of breath at the moment of the blow. Tense here, engage your core, force the air out. All right, so let's do simple punch again, sitting stance punch. Ready? Now we're focusing on all other things: reaction force, concentration, equilibrium. Now breath control. And hana, two, set, net, dos, yos, yo, yede, yede, ayo, yede, and pro, shot. Good. So you see, it's just short, sharp, bang. Don't make it a big thing. Now, sometimes it can be created into a big thing when you enter competitions, and breath control is an element, but the element isn't how loud you can do your breath. The element is doing the correct breath at the right time. So is it coordinated? Is it continuous? Is it connecting? Is it fast? That's what they're judging. They're judging to make sure your timing is correct on your breath control. They're judging to make sure you're using the correct type of breath control for the correct technique, not how loud you do it, right? But because you're a competitor and you want to make sure the judges can hear, we tend to sometimes make it a little bit louder. For competition, not a problem. Normally, training is not necessary, okay? It's for you to sort out, not for your instructor to hear or for everybody else in the whole dojo to hear, okay? So short, sharp exhalation of air, this way. Now let's move on to mass. So as I said, concentration and mass, quite linked as far as the hip's concerned. We're trying to utilize this downward force, okay? And again, thinking about the speed aspect, using gravity to increase that speed. And also it mentions in the theory of power about finishing your blocking or your attacking tool slightly lower than your shoulder. Or if you're flying and you're doing a flying kick, say a flying side kick, then your foot should not be higher than your hips. It should be either level or even better, slightly lower, okay? But when we're talking about trying to produce a power, like I mentioned in my tutorial about braking, we've got to have a straight line, all right? But if we're thinking about utilizing gravity and we're just attacking an opponent, which is a body, then we haven't got this flat board, and slightly dropping is going to produce a little bit more power in that downward motion. But you've got to understand about the physics of what we're doing and the application of when we're using it and when we need to think about a straight line breaking some boards, all right? So mass, let's think about this and the sine wave. So you utilize your knee spring and twisting or jerking the hip, not just this way, we can also do it this way. So if you say you did a front snap kick, you'd be pushing the hip forward here to create that mass going forwards, okay? So let's do a middle and a forearm block to your right and to your left, or to your left and to your right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from a parallel stance into a walking stance with a middle and a forearm block. Now I shouldn't have to tell you, as black belt holders, this foot needs to turn. If you don't turn it, then this hip is going to stay there, okay? So from this position, we're just going to do this. Watch. Here. So not only are we going from up here to down here, we're also going to rotate this. We're going to jerk it. We're going to twist it in the direction of the block, right? But we don't need to go back here first. We just need to go one with the arms as the backward motion, and now utilize that turn. Don't waste it, use it, okay? 준비. So we're thinking about that mass, going down into the stance and twisting the hip into the technique. Ready? 하나. Good. 바로. Now we're going to go to your right. 하나. Good. 바로. So you see, it starts off a bit slow and accelerates, right? So we have to try and accelerate it, okay? Again, ready? To your left. 하나. 바로. To your right. 둘. 바로. To your left. 하나. 바로. To your right. 하나. 바로. Now, are you thinking of this? Get your thought into here. Watch. One. Now, boom, this way. So you see, this goes first. It's like the crack of a whip. You have to move your arm first, and then the whip follows, and it accelerates so much that it breaks the sound barrier. Okay, the sound barrier, so it cracks. This is like your, if you like, your arm, your body, your arm of the whip, and your hand is the whip end, right? So this is the whip. This is the whip going into the person's arm, which is your hip. So from here, let's go to the left again. So you're going to go backward motion. One, here. I haven't turned anything yet. Now, bang, this way. So you're going to go 1, 2. But it should finish at the same time. Shouldn't go boom, boom. Okay? So it would be as bad as not using it at all. Ready? To your left. 하나. Good. 바로. And to your right. 하나. 바로. One more to the left. 하나. 바로. And shut. Good. Now the last one, speed. Now remember what I said at the beginning. Reaction force, concentration, equilibrium, breath control, and mass all go towards the speed. So we need to make sure we're doing all of that right to make sure we have the speed, we have that acceleration, we have that velocity. Okay, so now we're thinking about building that speed, trying to do it as fast as we can by the time it finishes. Okay, so again, like I said, you can't expect to start fast and go at the same speed. It's acceleration. So it has to start off somewhere. So it starts off and then it whips, and this will actually create more speed, just like a whip. So if you want to get faster, if you want a faster technique, utilize your waist. Okay? So ready? Again, just keeping it simple, middle and forearm block to your left. But really think about this, which creates the speed of the technique. So try and do it twice as fast now. But you're not trying to do it twice as fast. You're actually utilizing the technique to make it twice as fast. Ready? And 하나. Good. 바로. To your right. 둘. 바로. And to your left. 하나. Good. 바로. To your right. 하나. Good. 바로. Sitting stance punch. Ready? So now we're going to put all of that together. Okay? You're pulling this fist back. You're focusing on the front two knuckles. You're really focused on your equilibrium, the center of gravity being right in the center of both feet, your back being nice and straight. Sharp exhalation of breath at the moment of the punch. You're utilizing these knees to drop the body down. As you finish the punch, you finish that movement. Utilizing the hip very slightly in a sitting stance. Don't twist. If you twist too much, then you could be going out there and back round here. We need to be going this way. So it's just going straight, not over there and back, right? So you're utilizing this mass in this and this, which all of that, if you do that correctly with the relaxation, make sure you're bending the arms correctly or slightly. that will produce the speed. And if you produce that speed, you will produce that power. Okay? Ready? And remember, it has to accelerate. It can't start off fast. It has to go this way. Ready? Good. Third. Set. Net. Dos. Yos. Yogo. Yellen. Ayo. Yell. And the polo. Shot. Good. Now let's prove that, shall we? I've got this piece of wood, just a simple piece of pine, right? Now, if I just do that, it doesn't break, right? There's a bit of mass, but it won't break because there's no speed. Now, if I put some speed into that technique as well as this mass from here, it completely smashes, okay? So there was no holding of that piece of wood. There was no force holding it. It couldn't catch up with the speed of my fist, so it had to break. If I did it slowly, it would have caught up with my fist and I would have just pushed it. So you see, speed is power. So let's just go through those elements again, just to finish, okay? So we have 6 elements in the theory of power. We have reaction force, 2 types. Yours and your opponent's rushing towards you. Concentration, concentrating all of that mass in the waist into a very small area, either your front 2 knuckles, the knife hand, the fingertips, point of the elbow, all of that mass into a very concentrated area to produce maximum force. Equilibrium, we must have good balance throughout, not just when we're stationary, but when we're moving, okay? Breath control, a sharp exhalation of air for each blow. Yes, we've got exceptions. We have connecting motions, we have continuous motion, we have fast motions. But that we'll look at that another day. We're just thinking about a single technique. Sharp, short, sharp exhalation. Not this big noise. Okay? It's about this, not what's going on here. Mass. Utilizing your knee spring to drop the body down and at the same time linked in with the concentration, utilizing this mass in the direction of what we're doing, okay? And therefore, all of this goes towards producing maximum speed. As I explained about the stone with a bit of mass but no speed, didn't break the glass. Tiny bit of mass, lots of speed in a downward force, increasing acceleration, increasing the force, smashes the glass, okay? So, all of this theory of power, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 go up to the speed or produces the speed. And if we look at all of this theory of power, put it into an equation, we have in Taekwondo half mass times velocity squared, which equals the power. So we could actually measure how much power we're doing. So remember, it's not all about how big you are. It's about your technique. It's about distance and angles, of course, and how fast and how much acceleration that technique has got. Okay? So the small person could easily defend themselves against a much bigger person if we utilize the theory of power and we really truly understand it. Zoom lessons. Okay? So face this way. Chariot, Kunyi, and Hassan. Thank you.